Well, hello again. Our next panel is called Critical Path, Role of the Fabricator. And for all you steel erectors out there, these are the guys you probably want to talk to at lunch, so just don't all be chasing them at the one time. First, we have Greg Orff, President of Survey Steel Company, Ken Bird, Director of Fabrication for Supreme Steel, and he's also a legal trustee member for Impact. Dan Welsh, President of Washington Iron Works, and Andy Huber, Director of Sales and Estimating for Merrill Steel. Merrill subs out all their erection. Supreme is a fabricator erector. Very rarely, I guess when you drop down in the U.S., you might sub some out.
Sublet out there.
But usually in Canada, you do it yourself, right?
That's correct, yep.
Greg is 100% pure old-time fabricator. And Dan, he's a fabricator erector himself. And his shop is Union Iron Workers as well. So I'd like for each of you to start out, and we'll start with Andy, talking a little bit about your company and where your sweet spot is, and go from there.
Sure, thank you, Bill. First of all, I'd like to thank you for inviting us up here to speak, not only on behalf of our individual companies, but also the fabrication industry in general. So Merrill Steel has been in business since 1962. We own and operate two facilities, our largest being in central Wisconsin, another being in Springfield, Missouri. We own our own trucking division, and so we're really able to get to all parts of the country. We've worked in, I think, 46 out of 50 states, including Alaska. Primarily in today's market, we're doing a lot of heavy structural steel, automotive, high-tech manufacturing facilities. Those seem to be the kind of the sweet spot right now. Formerly, we were very large in the power and energy sectors, large-scale duct work and plate work of that kind. That type of work isn't necessarily as prevalent in today's market, but I'm sure with some discussion on the panel later about emerging markets, we're probably going to see some of that coming back around here in the future. So, just very happy to be here. Thank you, Bill.
Okay, Ken.
Supreme Steel is my employer. We primarily focus on Western Canada. We run 3 fabrication facilities. 2 of those are in Edmonton and 1 in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, all unionized shops, 805 and 838. And as Bill mentioned, we perform all of our own erection and in Canada primarily. So Western Canada is a big space. We tend to focus on the larger projects. We have a dedicated bridge division where we focus mainly on, of course, plate girder buildups and plate girder bridges. In terms of the sweet spot in the market, industrial projects, large commercial. We do pursue work and continue to perform work within the Pacific Northwest of the U.S., where we would sublet erecting, but the sweet spot for us obviously is if we can self-perform, that's what our preference is.
Great.
Yeah, I'm with Survey Steel Company. We are a larger fabricator based nationwide. We have 7 fabricating plants, an employee-owned company. We started back in the 1950s and have grown progressively across the years. Bill mentioned we sublet all of our erection, and we do. Back in the day, before my day, we did own our own erection company, and we decided that wasn't what we did well, and we needed to subcontract that work to y'all who do that well. So we are purely a fabricator now. We are operating in most of the major metropolitan markets, doing commercial high-rises, hospitals, manufacturing, pharmaceutical, you name it, we will fabricate it. It needs to be on the larger size job for us to really bring our value to the project. And we are continuing to expand in the U.S.
Dan.
Yeah, good morning. Yeah, Washington Iron Works, founded in 1921. We were primarily a miscellaneous and architectural metal fabricator and erector. We've always installed our own work. As Bill mentioned, we are a union shop, and we've always used union installation. Most of our projects are larger, SoFi Stadium being fairly recent, Getty Center, those type of projects. But we have covered the waterfront. We've worked in all 50 states in the 70s and 80s doing prisons. We're known for the, again, ornamental stuff. That does not translate well to FOB. Yeah, so it's something you got to do yourself, I feel. We continue to look for opportunities everywhere we can, and it's been a great partnership with the ironworkers as we move forward.
I'd like to ask you, several of the industries and parts of the construction sector have actually declined a bit recently. Some of it, I guess, COVID related, others of it based on economics. But from where I see, in steel fabrication and erection, it's more rock and roll than I've seen it. And I've been doing this for 55 years, and I've never had a backlog like the one we have right now. So how do you guys look at that, and how do you attribute the fact that you're above the curve and some of these other places may not be, some of your competitors?
I'll jump in and take that. I'd say right now we're in a unique period of time where the number of what I'm calling mega projects is just, really unthinkable. We used to think of a 4,000 or 5,000 ton job as being like a really nice, good medium to large size project, and now, we're bidding 10,000 ton jobs like they're nothing. And so, there seems to be, just with changing markets and changing, technologies, it seems that we are poised to undertake this new industrial revolution. And so I think for the larger projects, they're kind of leading the way. So maybe some of the commercial projects have kind of dipped and waned. So the small and medium sized projects may not be there, but just the sheer number of mega projects in these major industries are kind of keeping everyone afloat and everyone busy.
I would also say it's the type of projects you chase too. We do high rises. We topped out our last high rise probably in the last year. We haven't started any new high rises. The vacancies in the major cities have made it such that commercial construction is slow right now, extremely slow. So we look more to the manufacturing, healthcare, pharmaceutical, and universities. That's where they're spending their money. The interest rates are less sensitive to the interest rate swing than maybe the commercial developers are.
We're seeing, primarily Canada, we're seeing a challenge just in terms of manpower availability, which creates heartburn for us. The number of projects aren't necessarily extraordinary, but what is out there is certainly drawing a lot of people away. The field guys will tell you that people are all getting drawn to the West Coast. Local 97's been the benefactor of a lot of that. But in terms of fabrication, it's fairly steady currently, but the challenge, of course, is just trying to man up appropriately with trying to get the labor to produce the work. The benefit of the hectic pace below the lower 49th parallel is that we don't have the interlopers coming into Canada looking for to fill their roster with work in our neighborhood. So it does tend to lighten things up somewhat, but we're still seeing some stuff going offshore just simply because of the size. Yeah,
Los Angeles, where we primarily do most of our work, is somewhat insulated from the rest of the country right now due to the Olympics coming in 2028. So I think we've got another couple years of a pretty good run down there. Unfortunately, it's bringing a lot more competition. But that's something that we just have to deal with. We're a niche player, so we've always been able to find our niche. But right now, pretty optimistic about the LA basin, Southern California for the next 2 to 3 years, at least.
For those of you who sublet your erection, I know you don't always have a union erector on your project. I know that's market driven in many cases. But the fabricators that I talk to and the fabricators I work for say, having a union erector on our jobs is a treat. But Joe Blow developer over here, he's not going to pay for that. And, we're just under pressure to take qualified prices from non-union suppliers. Explain, if you will, to the group why you think it's a treat, quote unquote, to use a union erector over an unorganized erector. So.
I'll take that one first. It is a treat. And why is it a treat? There's a value proposition that can be made. Often they say you get what you pay for, right? And I think you can say that with union versus non-union erection. I think that the training that comes through the apprenticeship program, impact, and especially with the safety awareness training that comes through the union organizations, delivers a better product. It delivers it through safety, quality, and probably dependability of schedule. And that's huge. And while it's sometimes difficult to overcome that cheap price, making that value proposition is important for those that are willing to hear it. Because at the end of the day, at the end of the job, they're often better off by paying that higher price. I've seen it over and over.
Yeah, I'll echo Greg's comments. Really in the field, on our heavy industrial side, I tried a couple non-union erectors back in the 80s, and union iron workers had to step in and essentially rescue the projects. And it comes down to skill and ability. We have, as a union trade, we have better people. And it doesn't bother me, actually, in the marketplace, competing with a non-union guy, because I think we're better at what we do. And, that's kind of what it all comes down to. You're right. You get what you pay for.
I think the breadth and depth of, the availability of manpower in the union sector is certainly superior to everywhere else. When we talk about safety, we talk about the ability to ramp in and ramp out of a project, and typically larger commercial projects where you're not starting out with a gang of 50 people. It's usually a slow jump in, and all of those factors come into play and are definitely beneficial in terms of having a union erector. And to that end, Supreme is typically only focused on unionized erecting in terms of the sublet partners that we might take on.
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that's been said here. Merrill, in the fabrication world, we think of ourselves as a premium fabricator offering a premium service. And what I empower all of our sales staff to do is sell the quality, sell the services. And it's not just about the low dollar price out there. Because often what you'll find is, the guy who goes in low is going to change order his way out, and ultimately that's at the detriment of the client's interests and ultimately the project's interests. So for a lot of reasons, like selling the value is really the name of the game that I'm trying to put in perspective for my team. And I think what we're finding is at bid stage, the design information is worse and worse and worse. And the concept of design build and the revisions and the changes, we need to be adaptable. We need to be flexible. And frankly, the flexibility that union labor offers, being able to ramp up, ramp down, push labor around in maybe some different projects to kind of fit the needs of a whole industry, that flexibility is really what's going to be needed in this market where time and speed and getting that building up and handling all the changes that come along with it, flexibility that the union iron workers brings is very much needed.
Thank you. Most of the fabricators that us erectors work for are our customer, obviously. Their customer is the general contractor, usually. One of the things that we have been talking about a lot, and really it started at this conference last year, but we had our legal trust meeting yesterday, and we spent a lot of time talking about substance abuse, depression, suicide, which has become quite an issue in our industry. What do you hear from the general contractors about their expectations relative to that, not only for your company, but pushing it down to your subcontractors?
I would say it's a mixed bag. There's some very reputable contractors out there who, when they say safety is their number one priority, they mean it. And unfortunately, a phrase that I've coined, within Merrill is sometimes, safety, or the idea of safety, is just an illusion. And so, you'll hear people say that, we want to preserve mental health, and we're sensitive to overworking people. And then the moment that a schedule slips, it's like all of a sudden you're working, 6 10s and then an 8 on a Sunday. And so it's that contradiction that really makes me upset, because there are certain contractors who, to the rest of the world, they want to present this image, but behind closed doors and in the superintendent's meetings, they're about as ruthless as they come. So I think promoting the good contractors and highlighting those, and as an industry pushing back on the contractors who are doing it more as like a symbolic gesture, I think it's going to take an act from all of us to kind of push all those less than desirable contractors in the right path, not let them push us to lead to unsafe practices, lower quality standards, things like that.
Yeah, I agree. It does get lost in the project challenges, but I also think that we are better than we were yesterday, and we're going to be better again tomorrow. And I think the reason for that is we keep talking about it, and we keep it at the forefront of what we're talking about. We're not always talking about how fast is the steel going up, how many picks did we get today. We're talking about safety. We're asking how people are doing. We're taking care of people. And yet, we're going to get better tomorrow. We're not there yet. I don't know if we'll ever be there, but we are better than we were. We just have to avoid that temptation of chasing the schedule first and foremost, because that's probably not the most important thing.
So, we may not be seeing it a lot from the GC side, but, from our perspective, we've taken steps and continue to take steps, recognizing the challenges that are associated with mental health. We have lost individuals due to suicide, not in our Edmonton facilities, but certainly in some of our others. And we also recognize that we have substance abuse issues from time to time. And so, we're taking steps to educate our people, those in leadership roles, with mental health training, so that they can help guide people. And we're not ever going to expect that individuals are going to be able to become mental health professionals, but they certainly can help recognize the challenges and therefore guide that individual into the right space to get treated. And it seems to me that this pulling through a COVID has had a bit of a delayed reaction with a lot of people, and we're seeing some of that in terms of some elements of post-traumatic stress, it seems, and we're just focusing on trying to do the best we can to make sure that our people get looked after.
Yeah, Bill, from a general contractor standpoint, there's no question the more sophisticated projects, more sophisticated owners are pushing the safety and health issues a lot more now. As a trade, we've come a long way, compared to the 80s or even early 90s, and we've cleaned up our act a lot. It's unfortunate that general contractors did not buy into what we were trying to do and what we have done. But yes, the mental health initiatives now are definitely being flowed downhill. Something I think as a trade we need to recognize, and we need to actually take a look at how to deal with that. Safety, from our standpoint, we take it very seriously. We have a safety council in the shop that meets, regularly, weekly. In the field, we try to get the field foreman together at least once a month and talk about things like that. It's part of the trade now. No more cowboys anymore.
Right. Well, it is, and Ken can attest to, he was in our meeting yesterday. We talked about these issues probably longer than we ever have in the past. And the general officers of the union and the trustees and all of our trustee members, whether labor or union, we had a very in-depth conversation about this and already put into motion some things when it's ready to be put out there to the general public. But you'll be seeing some movement from Impact and the ironworkers on trying to take some big steps to wrap our hand around this. And Sean Neely is kind of the guy who really got me educated through the last year or so. We've had several conversations between meetings, and then when these suicides started occurring, there are people out there that deal with this and are very professional about this and can do a great job, but our labor officers and our contractors need to know who these people are and how do you engage them in their services, and we'll be passing that along shortly. A couple years ago, when we started to roll out of COVID and all these big boxes, Amazons, data centers, all these car plants and manufacturing facilities, owners would have schedules, and then we'd bid the job, and then fabricators come back and say, oh, we can't get the steel. And that was a problem for a long time. We had one job in North Carolina a couple years ago where one of the fabricators who was the joist guy, he said, we can't get you the joist that we promised you on time. And we worked our way out of it, but that's a tough thing. So what are you seeing now? Is that turning? Do you sense it turning? Is it still going to be an issue, or?
I sense it turning a little bit, but I also sense greater collaboration amongst the industry. And I say that as I'm collaborating with more of my competitors now than I probably did in the past 30
Is that collaborating or colluding?
Collaborating.
Okay.
Be very clear, collaborating.
Okay.
Yeah, we are collaborating with competitors I never would have imagined 5-10 years ago. And it's working well. And we're able to attack these large projects, whether they be high rises or the auto plants that you're talking about. We're able to attack it and deliver that schedule that owner's looking for. The schedules are getting crazier and crazier. They're really driven by schedule, and we're able to do that by working together.
Well, and fabricators are nothing more than just manufacturers, right? And so our ability to kind of ramp up and ramp down is I would say, relatively limited. And so we need to maintain a relatively even keel amount of work. And when those dynamics of massive changes or delays or something that affects the project schedule that necessitates a severe increase in capacity, we have no choice but to approach a competitor, like you mentioned, Greg. And so, at Merrill, we'll say, we're competitors on bid day, but then, we're friendly thereafter, because it's just the name of the game right now. The owners aren't going to allow a time extension. They're going to just pay you to accelerate. And as a result, there is a phenomenal amount of collaboration. In specifically talking about the joist world, I mean, that Amazon boom that we had, for 3 or 4 years, it just sucked all the capacity out of the deck and joist manufacturing sector. And there weren't enough manufacturers to enter into that space to increase the capacity. And so there was this phenomenon where all of these jobs were designed for joist. There wasn't enough addition to the resources available, and the project schedule suffered. I think the type of work is kind of changing. A lot of those joist-heavy buildings are being kind of thought differently. And so lead times on a lot of different steel items are coming back to normal, I would say. That being said, for as hot of a market as several that you mentioned, Bill, locking down a steel fabricator just to lock in that capacity right now is probably priority number 1. Priority number 2 is then placing your mill order, and then shortly thereafter is locking in the erector, because just in general, the lead times for all steel items, while being kind of normalized and consistent with one another, they are drawing out because everybody's got increased backlog.
Certainly echo Andy and Greg's comments. In terms of getting that excess capacity or pursuing that capacity on that challenging project or projects is the idea of collaborating with your former competitors, and subletting work we'll take on from them as they'll take on from us. The material lead times, depending on exactly what we're looking for, can be a bit of a challenge, but certainly, the notion of locking down your material as soon as you've got a advanced bill worked up, then you can get it underway. But the challenge that the industry sees is this lack of patience by the client and customer for a reasonable lead time. It's always quick, and there's a certain amount of time it takes to put the drawings together and get our drawing packages together. We don't always see the drawings completed by the time we start fabricating. Material, once again, we would love nothing better than to have everything in the yard before we start fabricating. That's just not reasonable. There's a lot of this belief that, by clients that, all it takes to have a baby is 9 women in 1 month, and it just doesn't happen. So.
Well, in addition to what we had as a availability of steel crisis, which it sounds like you fellas feel like the worm's turning here a little bit, we had a transportation crisis. Couldn't get drivers, couldn't get trailers. I got a raising gang standing out on a job. He's going to be there at 7 o'clock Monday morning. No, he's not. He hasn't even left the yard yet because they haven't found a driver for their truck. Now, some of you guys who do your own hauling, you can work around that, but most fabricators sublet their hauling. So is this, from your vantage point, still an issue, or is that?
It hit us hard for a while. It seems to be settling down, but the premiums to haul, we were doing work in the Pacific Northwest, premiums to haul just skyrocketed and created all kinds of heartburn for us from a project management perspective. We get into some fairly specialized hauling, particularly with the plate girder work, and that seems to be sort of in its own space. The regular hauling seems to be coming down, but we're still paying a premium, and we're still, hoping things resume to normal.
Yeah, I would kind of echo that. I mean, we saw prices just to get from Southern California to Northern California triple. Wow. And they have not gone down, and they're not going to go down. Prices of material obviously have come down or stabilized, somewhat over the last 3 or 4 months. But so those things are not going to change as far as the hauling goes. I think the freight industry has gotten used to that, and I don't see those coming down anytime soon, at least from our perspective.
One other thing I should add is that we used to rely on the ability from our vendor, the trucking outfits, to spot trailers for us so that we could load, and if we needed a half a dozen or a dozen trailers or whatever, they'd drop them off. We'd cycle them through, load them up, and get them out. Now they almost have an expectation that we'll hot load every load. It's just or charge us demurrage, etc. So there's a lot of negotiating, a lot of going back and forth on with respect to that. We have to respect the fact that there seems to be a bit of a shortage and a shortage of equipment and a high demand on it. So they've got some challenges themselves. But yeah, it's still there.
I feel like I should be knocking on wood right now because we haven't had these challenges. Of course, pricing has gone up. Everyone's seen that. But with the exception of a few loads coming out of the mill to the plant, we've had very good luck with consistency from our haulers, and we do use subcontract haulers. So price has gone up, and you're right, it's not coming back down. It's the new normal. I hate that term, but it's the new normal.
It is the new normal, well, for freight anyway, yeah.
You had mentioned earlier the fact that on some of these larger projects, the owners want to lock down the construction team as fast as they can. And what I've seen now is more of a partnering approach with the entire group, the erector, the fabricator, the general contractor. So we got a lot of erectors out there. How do they get to be your partner on something like that?
The best projects we run are the ones where we got in early and we got the team in there early. And that means the fabricator, the erector, and the detailer. And you start that process with a very strong pre-plan. And in that pre-plan, you plan as much of the project as you possibly can. And in doing that, you get the best possible project. If it was a fabricator doing that alone, the erector's not going to be happy, the GC's not going to be happy. If they're all doing it together, you can all get your ideas in it. And there's a workable solution that everyone's going to be happy, or at least happier. So that pre-planning early on in the stage is huge. It does happen more on some jobs than others, but the jobs it happens on run better.
You know, I think in terms of sublet that we would do in the U.S., we've dealt with some very sophisticated enterprises that are erectors, and certainly to Greg's point, the pre-planning or the planning that they undertake is a big factor. But if somebody were just starting out, wanting to break in with our enterprise, for instance, then chances are it would be a bit of a challenge just based on the size of work that we typically engage on. But that's not to say that we wouldn't get their ear, or they wouldn't get our ear in terms of if they approached us. So.
Yeah, I mean, there certainly needs to be a phenomenal level of trust to choose the partner, and you're certainly bringing someone to the table and vouching for them in many ways, right? So, there needs to be a level of trust from all stakeholders, all contractors to make that project successful. So the company off the street that cold calls you, they're likely to have to go through a phenomenal vetting process in order to be considered. So in a scenario where, like Greg said, you can pick your team, the fabricators are going to be a little bit more reserved. Obviously, we're going to be looking for people who are more geared towards performance and trustworthiness and just having the goal of the project in mind, because the owner or the client or the contractor, the general contractor, they felt it necessary to bring you onto the team for a reason because you exhibited all those characteristics. And so we would necessarily have to expect that of the partner that we would choose.
Yeah, from a contractor perspective, whether you're an erector or a general contractor, it's crucial to have a fabricator involved early in the process. What is a realistic detailing schedule? How long is it going to take to get material? How long is it going to take to actually fabricate? We do a lot of tenant improvement work with feature stairs involving stainless and glass and curved members, and you can't do that in 6 weeks. It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But there are very unrealistic expectations out there. So if you don't get a fabricator involved early to kind of go through those things, you'll never get it done. What is realistic and what actually can be accomplished.
What yesterday in our safety segment of our trust meeting, our international safety director, Steve Rank, had a device. It's a tie-off device. It's about this big, and you put a 3/4 bolt to the back of it, and you bolt it onto a beam or column. Okay. Now I know a lot of you guys punch holes for safety lines and things like that now, but when an erector comes up to you, now we're talking about something that's new. When a erector comes up to you and asks you to do that, is that, oh, well, that's going to cost me, what? Or are your machines so sophisticated now that they don't care about an extra hole?
They are far more sophisticated now to do that than back in the days of hand punching and punch lines and drill lines. So it's much easier to accommodate those things. But the earlier you can accommodate it in the process, the easier it is. If the detailing is done and you're into fabrication, and oh, by the way, I need these connections, that's harder. The earlier you can get that in, the early collaboration is huge in that.
Yeah. I'd echo Greg on that also. If you don't have it in the detailing stage, it becomes a real pain. Because we're an erector ourselves, whatever the project requires to be safe, we're going to do, because it's our people.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, the earlier you can identify those things, identify those special requirements, the better off you're going to be.
Absolutely. echo Dan and Greg's comments completely. The idea of adding a few holes with, through a beam line or whatever, the only thing is typically we're operating off a machine code which is derived from the detailing side. So, it's absolutely vital it's done up front. Otherwise, you are chasing it with a mag drill and and you're laying things out by hand, which sort of defeats.
Yeah, Ken, we don't even have a beam line, so it's going to be a mag drill for us anyway.
Okay, awesome.
Well, I remember when we all started going to 6 foot, some of the fabricators were very, resistant for the whole reasons like, well, heck, I've already got the detailer started, and this and that. It doesn't seem to be quite the issue as it was, but I think you're going to be seeing a lot more attempts through the ironworker and the ironworker employers to add extra tidbits of safety to the job every chance we can. And this new apparatus that Steve had yesterday, that's just one of them. I see we're getting close, so I wanted to talk to you about, and one of you guys mentioned it earlier, on these mega sites. Our company's involved with some of them. The International has made a pledge that they're going to staff these sites. And we're talking about a lot of ironworker hours. And in the sites that we've been engaged in, that's what they've done. And they've surprised, I'm not going to say they surprised us because I take the leadership of the union at their word. Usually try as hard as you will, it's hard to do that. How have your jobs been? Have you been fully staffed on your jobs?
Yeah, on Merrill's projects, we've been very fortunate. In talking with other contractors and pursuing other work, I mean, it's obvious that Merrill has been, let's say, on the fortunate side of this equation, because I think that a lot of other job sites have experienced problems. I can think of one example in particular very recently where a contractor asked us to not use union iron workers because they believed that it would be more difficult for them to pull from a local or boom people in. And so they were actually pushing us towards a non-union option, which I thought was just like a very odd rationale, considering just, like for all the reasons I said before, the flexibility that the union iron workers bring to the table, if anything, you'd be wanting to push it that way in a labor shortage issue. But yes, for the Merrill mega projects, we've been very fortunate. But then again, to what I said before, we've partnered with very reputable firms who are out there for performance, and when they say they're going to do something, they've done it.
Yeah, I think the non-union erection companies are challenged to ramp up and ramp down their workforce the way union erectors can do through the help from the halls. And for a non-union erector to try to attack some of these large 40, 50,000 ton jobs is probably not realistic. It would have to be split between several erectors to do that. Whereas going with union erectors, like we're seeing on a number of the auto plants, that can be achieved.
Well, fellas, we're getting close to being down to the end. I'd like to thank you all for the travel and coming out here. These are our customers, guys. And if we don't make them happy, we're not going to be happy, that's for sure. And very reputable firms, high class. That's why we asked them to be here. And we really appreciate everything that you bring to our industry and the opportunity that you bring for our ironworkers and ironworker employers to have the work. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.